lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It's Slay's podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And today on the show, we're going to be reviewing Imaginary, which was released last weekend, March 8th, 2024, exclusively in theaters. So, Rowan, let's start with the obvious question. Did you have an imaginary friend growing up? And based off of that answer, were you looking forward to Imaginary?
I didn't not that I know of. I don't think I had an imaginary friend. So I guess I just have no exciting answer or antidote for that.
Thanks, yeah. Thanks for the contributing there.
Yeah, maybe I should have lied or something, came up with a good story and or something. As for was I looking forward to this, I mean, I feel we have this discussion every time with Blumhouse, don't we? Like, I look forward to them as much as I can look forward to them. I want to be the Blumhouse bro, but you know, it's kind of like an abusive relationship. I should leave. I just keep coming back though. What about you?
Yeah, as far as I know, I never had an imaginary friend either. I think I had kind of like a Barney doll that I'd like carry around with me a bit,
okay,
or
yeah.
maybe have some like tea parties and whatnot. But I don't think his name was something different other than just Barney the dinosaur, right? So yeah, nothing interesting there to contribute either. But yeah, similar to you, it's a new horror movie in theaters. Of course, we're rooting for it. But I was very apprehensive about this one. Jeff Wadlow, the director, like he did Fantasy Island a few years ago, which I
don't remind me.
I just couldn't stand it. And then he also did, what was it, like Truth or Dare as well, which most people don't really hold in high esteem either. So yes, I was very nervous about this one. What I will say is that conceptually, kind of like when it was pitched, it was like, oh, it's an imaginary friend horror movie. Obviously, a lot of us can extrapolate from that and be like, oh, maybe it's a demonic presence, or, you know, maybe it's someone who lives in the walls or something like that. But just conceptually, the idea of kind of like a cursed teddy bear, or a teddy bear that could be malicious as this, you know, this evil presence or something in the movie. I did think it was interesting. I thought it was so simple that that it wasn't done before. Obviously, we've seen it done with, you know, cursed dolls and that sort of thing, but I don't remember like a cursed teddy bear. So I was a little bit interested in that. I was like, oh, I'm surprised it took them so long to get to this.
Do you think they had this like planned out, knowing Five Nights at Freddy's was like coming out, that they're just like, you know, they're like, hey, let's line up another one?
I think I was more so expecting that, you know, you got John Krasinski's Ifs coming up soon.
I forgot about
Imaginary
that.
Friends, you know, it's a big year for Imaginary Friends. We got Ifs and this. So yeah, I don't know. It was something that I was looking forward to it a little bit, but was this the best I could have imagined it being? Well, before we get into that, let's kick it on over to the trailer.
Home sweet home. I just want this to be good for the girls.
We left you all alone down here.
I like your new friend, Alice.
Chauncey says you're not allowed to play with us. Because you left him.
Every culture has entities that tether to the young. We call them imaginary friends. And they're angry that you left.
Imaginary. Rated PG-13. Only in theaters March 8th.
What you just heard is from Imaginary, directed by Jeff Wadlow and written by Jeff Wadlow, Greg Erb, and Jason Ormland. And the story is as follows. When Jessica moves her family back into her childhood home, her youngest stepdaughter Alice develops an eerie attachment to a stuffed bear named Chauncey. Chauncey's games start out innocent enough, but it doesn't take long before things turn sinister. As Alice's behavior becomes increasingly concerning, Jessica intervenes only to realize that Chauncey is much more than the stuffed bear she believed him to be. Now here on Now Slaying, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on Imaginary?
I mean, they're going to be pretty tempered for this, I feel. Spoiler-free, spoiler. I mean, I don't know about you, but I had a really hard time. Maybe it's just how I've already felt so hurt from Blumhouse this year.
We're talking about Night Swim?
We're talking about Night Swim. It's like basically the minute it started, I was just comparing everything to Night Swim. And I'm like...
No.
You know, is this going to be a Night Swim situation on my hands? I think possibly not. I kind of like you said, I was very intrigued by the idea of this, like, you know, creepy bear with slash. I mean, the trailers kind of already gave up, like, that you're going to see, like, you know, ghosts behind people.
Yeah.
We're going to get the jump scares, the PG-13 jump scares, or I'm assuming this is rated PG-13.
The ones that are a little bit overly telegraphed, of course.
Yeah, of course.
You can see coming a mile away.
Yeah, you're like, obviously, there's some reason this camera is, like, out of focus and only focusing on the background.
Wait, someone's looking under the bed. I hope there's not somebody on the other side, you know?
You know what? I will say this. You know, we made the joke at the beginning about Jeff Wadlow, and I don't know if I ever told it on any of the podcasts, but I'm not going to tell the whole story on this, but, you know, I have an infamous COVID and Fantasy Island experience where I made a whole staff at a theater just wait for me to finish Fantasy Island during COVID.
And you were just sitting through the entire credits, you know, just taking
and
it
I
all
just felt so bad 30 minutes into that movie that I was like, oh, what have I, you know, done? These people could possibly get sick, maybe die from COVID, and it was all for me to see this movie.
I'll butt in now. It's similar to me. Fantasy Island, I saw it, I think it was right before our theater cut or closed down for like COVID lockdown. I was like, I got to see Fantasy Island and like, I don't know, The Invisible Man or something, you know, basically right when it was about to shut down, and one was much better than the other.
Yeah, I feel like I saw Fantasy Island and then it shut down the next day. So maybe Fantasy Island shut the theaters down. That's
it could be
COVID. That it was in COVID. It was patient zero. But I don't know. Like, it's kind of hard to describe this. Like, I've never had a movie watching experience where like I truly felt so indifferent to everything I was seeing. Like, I wasn't angry. I wasn't like mind blowing or, you know, happy. But it was like, you know, I think it was like so many of these Blumhouse is how we describe them. It's just like inoffensive. It's just like very, you know, basic jump scare stuff. The score is like very basic. It's very telegraphed to what's going to happen. We're getting the sound effects kind of before, you know, the pounce comes. I did think, you know, I thought the acting was okay from the kids, in my opinion.
Okay. We're on the same page then. I actually have a note. I think the two kids did a good job, but specifically I thought Piper Braun, the younger girl Alice, I thought she kind of did a good job of like just being suitably cute as like a young girl, you know, kind of trying to make like Jessica and her have like an attachment to one another. And I thought she also did a pretty good job, obviously, of being like scared or, you know, having to deal with Chauncey later in the movie. That I was like, hey, Piper did a good job. I agree. What do you think about DeWanda Weiss? I'm curious.
So I wasn't overly familiar with her at all. I know she was like in one of the Jurassic Parks, I think, or something.
I think she's in like the last Jurassic World, yeah, and I can't stand that movie. But yeah, I think she was almost like a female pilot in that, if I remember correctly. She's kind of almost like the Han Solo character in that movie,
and I know I never watched it. It's on my watch list. I should really watch it. But she was the lead for She's Gotta Have It on Netflix, which was like the contemporary remake of Spike Lee's movie, and then he turned into a TV show, which I never saw.
Okay.
So I wasn't familiar with her. I'm gonna be honest, like, I thought she was pretty mediocre. Like,
yeah,
she didn't really give me much to work with in terms of a viewer.
For me, she felt a little bit miscast. And, you know, I'm more so talking about, like, I think it was like the hair and makeup and the styling choices and whatnot. She seemed like less of like a stepmom and more of like she was like ready to go to the red carpet or something. Like, I thought her makeup was very like heightened. She seemed very dolled up. I don't know if she's had work done or anything like that, but I kind of got like that vibe from the character. And I understand there's a certain degree here as the stepmother. They want to kind of make her feel different from the children. But it was like she felt like completely from a different world, especially when her character is supposed to be this, you know, children's author, this creative person. It seemed like to me she's never picked up and used a paintbrush in her life, where like we got to buy into that for the character to kind of be like working through things and taking like aspects from reality and putting them to the page that I don't know. She just completely didn't really work for me. It was like, I don't think I can remember her being like a good or a bad actress in Jurassic World Dominion. That movie was just overall so terrible. But in this, she certainly didn't really do much for me at all. I was very underwhelmed by her for sure.
I think, that was kind of my main issue with this is like we said, like I really liked Piper Braun and, I thought Tegan Burns as Taylor was pretty good, like as, the rebellious
I didn't really
team.
have
And I thought their relationship was like pretty good, pretty believable. Whereas even with Tom Payne that plays Max, like there wasn't enough of this relationship of this family or these people trying to become a family. Like, I just felt there was nothing built up for me to attach to so that when things inevitably go wrong that I'm like, oh, there's like a real, like family drama in here. Like I'm kind of thinking, of another Blumhouse property like Insidious or something where even those movies, which I'm not crazy about, but the family feels like lived in and like I understand the family connections.
The dynamic between them all.
Exactly.
It makes sense and the casting is on point and that's the thing that kind of elevates it. I agree. I thought the father was kind of miscast again. It was just like I don't really buy him as like a rock star or something. Like he just, I don't know, he seemed just like a lawyer or something to me basically.
His outfit was wild when he was like leaving in that hat. He had like the Pharrell Williams like brimmed hat going on.
Yeah.
And I must have missed him saying something because there was a lot of... My theater was pretty full, and it was a lot of talking. Ooh. It was a lot of kids. It was a lot of, it was a lot of who this was aimed at. It was like 12, 13-year-olds.
Did they enjoy it from what you could tell?
I mean, people were hooting and hollering at the screen, and
all right.
I got really distracted most of it because behind me was a grandmother. And like her, it seemed like 11, 12-year-old granddaughter. And anything that happened on the screen, the grandmother then whispered what she saw happen. She's like, oh, and she looks like she's walking to the corner of the room. There's a bear there or something. And I'm like, thank you for describing. Oh I'm getting like description video for free going on here.
Yeah.
But like the audience definitely seemed to enjoy it. I mean, like I said, I feel like I was probably one of the few seasoned horror people there. But you know what? Like I said, as inoffensive as it was, I did like the attempt at something, because I'll be 100% honest with you. Like I said, it really made me think about Five Nights at Freddy's, and I don't know if that's just because of furry bears and
I just like if you put a bear in a movie now, you're just like
Five Nights at Freddy's,
just like Five Nights at Freddy's.
Blumhouse, furry bear, something going on.
Cocaine bear
with that.
Five Nights at Freddy's, same thing.
To me, I was like, I did kind of enjoy. You could see a lot of influences from like other horror movies and other things, and that's one thing I always like in my horror movie, where even if it's not done well, I'm like, hey, at least I know this person's like trying. They watch horror, so they aspire to be something else. Yeah, like what are some of your thoughts on it?
Well, we've kind of went back and forth a little bit on it, but yeah, conceptually, I like the idea as well. As I said, of the teddy bear as kind of like this conduit into like some sinister revelations, and there are some stuff in the spoiler-filled section that I was like, I wish they explored this a little bit more. That I thought was interesting at the very least. Technically, I don't think the movie is incompetent, which is nice. I remember with Fantasy Island, I was literally like, I thought it was like nails on a chalkboard, like, completely just annoying to watch. Like I just very much disliked everything about it. This, for the most part, outside of like some revelations and some kind of twists and turns in the third act, I think most of it, it's kind of a smaller scale story that's just in a house. In a certain regard, it's kind of hard to mess it up. It very much looks like a lot of other movies, but it wasn't like off-putting. I wasn't like, oh my God, they're exceeding their reach here. It doesn't really fit. As I said, I like the acting of the kids. The scares didn't work for me. It got my mom. She literally did like, two arms in the air as like Oprah's trying to give away a car like, woo, like got her a couple of times. Carvey, my stepdad, he just fell asleep He thought it was incredibly dull. And that's the thing. I kind of think it was really dull too. I was watching it. I was pretty bored the entire time. I will say basically from the cold open, I was like, oh, this is not going to really be for me. It just felt like not what I was looking for, essentially. And I didn't like the music. You mentioned that it wasn't too bad. For me, it felt very like Spielberg-esque, not really horror-esque. It was just almost like a whimsical adventure, which, once again, certain revelations and certain kind of twists and turns make sense for that. And maybe they're even paying homage to like certain horror movies of that era. It's just, it was kind of not what I was looking for. And as I've mentioned a couple times, twists and turns, the third act. I think the third act is basically downright awful of this movie. I don't know if it worked for you. We'll probably get into it in the spoiler discussion. But it was very much a mixed bag, but I think a bag that was kind of bad for me for the most part. It was like, I agree. It's not like so bad that it's offensive. It's more so another one of those where there's like aspects of which I really like. It's just kind of like the movie does everything in its power to kind of ruin those few things I like as it goes on. Or it's like, damn, I really wish they went in a completely different, direction with what we're exploring here. And it was just something that I was bored by for sure as I was watching it. I found it quite dull.
It almost makes me think that we always tease and talk about we need like another tier in the rating system. Maybe we just need one that's called like, hey, at least it's not Night Swim.
Yeah, I mean, if you never listened to our Night Swim episode, we weren't really big fans of
we
that
gave
movie.
it 2 slays if you didn't listen to it.
And I will agree, this isn't as bad as Night Swim for sure, but I wouldn't say it's like dramatically better than Night Swim either. If you're looking for a movie with like, numerous kills and like a lot of excitement and all that stuff, this isn't really your movie. If you've seen the trailer, you've likely seen all the scares / anything to expect in this movie. Even stuff in the third act is in the trailer. It's just not really what I want when I get a Blumhouse horror movie. Even as someone who's not like a huge Megan defender, I didn't like love that movie like some people do online. It's just like that one has a lot more creativity and like interesting aspects to it than something like this. Literally, my favorite parts of this movie is just conceptually what it could have been. The movie we watched was not really what that wound up being. And I think the movie that I imagined, pun intended, could have been a lot better than what this wound up being. So yeah, it's not really something I'd recommend rushing out to see. What about you?
Yeah, I think you can probably wait till this streams. I mean, I guess if you want to give Blumhouse some money, go see it. There's enough kids seeing it, it seems, that I'm curious to see how this does. Maybe not with our market, but with who it's definitely aimed at. Like I said, that's why a lot of these like Blumhouse, especially like early year releases, I always feel kind of bad because it's like old man yelling at cloud vibe I feel I'm giving off. Because, like I said, it's just, they're not aimed at me, but then I also, think about the good things where like, I enjoyed Megan quite a bit. I think about like the Boogeyman from last year, which we I think we both kind of liked.
Yeah, we enjoy it. It's another one that kind of falls apart in the third act. But yeah.
But like to me, those are better examples of more of this kind of aimed at a younger audience, getting them into horror. And those are ones that just work better than something like this where, like, there's a reason it's coming out in Dumpuary, like,
we're a couple months past that now, but yes. Yeah, I agree. If this came out in January, it would have
Dumpuary for Blumhouse is just, like, half the year, so...
Yeah. That is another thing I guess I'll quickly say is that, it is one of those horror movies that it probably fits with a certain, demographic. If you are really young or this is like your introduction to horror, if some of these like concepts are new to you, you'd probably get a lot more out of it. I will also say that I did like a lot of the children's animated book stuff in it. Like, even though it was just, little snippets here and there, you get like some snippets of the drawings of what's happening in the story and how that's kind of paralleling her own life and aspects we're seeing in the movie. There was parts of which I wish it was kind of like Babadook. where the book is developing and kind of like coming to life almost. There's aspects obviously that she's taking from her real life and kind of putting into the material, and it does kind of have some like wholesome revelations with it. It was just the sort of thing where I was kind of liking to see the horror bleed into that a little bit more. Like I do very much like that aesthetic of when you have the children's animated, book kind of being perverted by horror to a certain degree. And there are aspects of course, where the horror kind of bleeds in with her job and whatnot. It was just I could have used a little bit more from that. So yeah, I mean, it's not awful. It's just, I wouldn't strongly recommend rushing out to see it in theaters. You feel the same.
Yeah.
With that, I think it's time to cut to our spoiler discussion for Imaginary. We are now in our spoiler discussion for Imaginary. So if you've not seen Imaginary, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, this is one that I feel like it has a few different little elements you can spoil. I don't know if they're the sort of thing that you're exactly shocked at when they come along, but what would you want to kick off the spoiler discussion with?
Well, I want to kick off the spoiler discussion with something that's going to be quick. We're not going to focus on too long, but Veronica Falcone, who plays Dr. Alana Soto, I want to salute her, because you know what? She knew what this was. She knew what this movie was. Hammed it up the entire scene she was in.
Okay, actually, I didn't realize who the character was until I just looked at the IMDb. I thought you were talking about Gloria.
Oh, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, I was like, can't stand that character.
That's a whole
you know what? I
will
give you. Yeah, Dr. Soto. She is probably in what I would say is the best scene of the movie, maybe? I don't know. Like, I think it was kind of tastefully done. It's like the whole, like, the therapist comes in and talks to the girls. Essentially, like, the scene in all these, like, kind of pseudo-possession movies, like, oh, is the little girl possessed? Does she have, an imaginary friend? And it's kind of like this scene where it's, like, framed a lot behind her head, and she's doing, like, Chauncey's voice and her voice, and she's talking to the, the therapist and whatnot. The therapist is, like, freaked out by what's happening. And it was my mom's favorite scene in the whole movie, and kind of when she talked about it afterwards, I was like, I guess it wasn't terrible. It is a scene that I've seen hundreds of times.
Oh, 100 times. Yeah.
I've seen it executed better. But I will say, I mean, it wasn't like awful.
I just liked it. They knew who they were casting. She had the accent going. And like, I was like, yeah, this is totally like, we're bringing in some like, Italian priest or something for an exorcist, or like, we're testing things out to see, if we need to go full exorcism.
Yeah, she's not the demonologist, but she's the person before you call in the demonologist.
Exactly. And I thought, I was just like, this is an amazing, like heat check moment for for her. And you brought it up, Gloria, the old lady, terrible.
Oh
like,
my God. Absolutely awful.
Miscast. I get what they were trying to do.
Well, she's the expert, right? Like, it's literally like the demonologist. Like, she comes in, she's like, oh, I've actually been studying this for years. Come into my house, little girl, and I will tell you everything about, like, Chauncey and this, parallel dimension and full of imagination. And it's just like, she even gets in there and it's like, she has this big, like, cheesy moment where she essentially is like, it's exactly as I imagined, or something like that, and the camera pulls up, 20 feet into the air as she's like screaming. And I'm just like, bro, what sort of movie did we fall into here now? She is so bad. I couldn't wait for her to get killed off and just dragged into one of those Monsters, Inc. stores. And it was just, I was just like, I wouldn't have had this character in the movie at all. If you have this character in the movie, at least make it a little bit more serious, where it's like, oh, there was something creepy in this house earlier, and I can't ever go back there. And it seemed like that's what they were doing. But instead they were like, oh no, I've been a part of this for your entire life. Surprise, I
think almost the reveal was too quick. We should have stuck more with the like, oh, this creepy woman just keeps showing up outside the house when I'm looking out the window. Spread it out. Yeah, there need to be a lot less of her, so she couldn't be so hammy for like an extra amount of time.
Well, yeah, she's basically like a sidekick for the whole third act. Like, it's basically like she comes into the movie and she doesn't leave until she dies. She's in there for probably a good 15 minutes and she's just awful the entire time. She's just used for exposition. She's just used for, as I said, like that demonologist expert trope that always comes in these like horror movies in the third act. And it's just like, I'm just tired of it. I didn't need that character in there. It's a more interesting movie if Jessica comes to learn about her past through either therapy or, some sort of like lucid dreaming, or like, even discovering things, peeling back the paint on her walls and seeing things. Like there's ways that you can divulge this information without having Gloria come in and be like, yo, I was the babysitter and I was there and watched everything happen as you vanished and, did nothing about it. Never told a soul for all these years. I wrote a couple of papers on it, but no one believed me because I'm the old kooky lady.
Yeah, and I mean, shout out Betty Buckley. She's like the 6th build star at Carrie. So like I definitely get, they were like, oh, we're gonna put like a little horror nod, little like someone from a horror movie they might recognize. But
she's not good. Yeah.
It's just not. It's not good at all. And I mean, we brought it up in the spoiler free. Like there's so many kind of beats from other movies they're trying to hit with this one. Like you said, the score to me really trying to invoke that poltergeist vibe. Like you said, I think Spielberg's the perfect example.
Of course, Spielberg didn't direct Poltergeist. I know there's a lot of back and forth on if he actually did, but yeah. It's very much like of that vein, right? It's like that adventurous kind of creepy score that works for like, I don't know, a Casper and the Friendly Ghost sort of movie where it's like has some horror elements, but it's also for children. It was just like, I guess I didn't expect this movie to be so for children, I guess. The whole third act, it's like if you're an adult, when we wind up in this kind of like twisted funhouse world full of imagination, it's like, I think basically every adult watching the movie, if at all you had any, tension built up, if you were unnerved by anything else that came up to that point, you would not care at all about anything in the third act. It's just so far off the rails and silly that it's just like, I don't know, as a horror movie, it's like a really bad third act. It's just, I understand you have the main little girl called Alice. We got to see her go down the rabbit hole and, wind up in another world. We have to do that. It's just what they do here is just, I think it's just awful.
We've got this, entrance into this other world that we're obviously, I mean, you're not going to know this, Colton, but it's full-blown ripoff of Beetlejuice. This is how This is how you enter the other realm. The ghostly realm is drawing a door on a wall that then appears once you fully draw it out and color it in. Like, it's a 100% nod to Beetlejuice. And yeah, the third act goes wild. We get into Coraline City territory here.
Yeah.
The coloring, everything about it, highly, obviously love for Tim Burton in this movie.
Well, it literally goes so far where it's like, these are replacements or figments of your imagination. And guess what? They're going to have not button eyes. It's going to be like the bear's eyes. But it's weird that, these really dark black eyes very much do look like button eyes to kind of evoke like how all these people are fake. Not to mention it's like very much like a little girl sneaking off to an alternate world through a door and kind of having to come back through the same door. And it's just like when I was watching, I was like, man, I haven't seen Coraline since it came out, but I know a lot of people hold that movie in really high esteem. Like people very much like love Coraline. When I was watching this, I was like, there are so many elements of this movie in the third act that just owes to Coraline that, like, for whatever reason, I did not at all see coming in the first act. At least not that direct comparison. I understood there was going to be like an alternate reality, of course, but it's just like, I don't know. It's almost like it's kind of like a ripoff in a way.
Oh, 100%.
It's literally like she goes into the other world, finds a fake mother that has buttons for eyes, essentially. And, she's choosing to live in this fake world where her mother and her have a more, a better relationship and she can wish and get whatever she wants and stuff, right? And then, of course, the mother winds up being, essentially like a pawn of Chauncey. And, it's kind of like this evil thing, right? Where it's just, I don't know. Once again, I haven't seen Coraline in ages, but a lot of these kind of, what I'm saying are like touchstones from Coraline from what I remember. So it was wild to watch this and kind of be like squinting and be like, man, am I crazy? Or is this a lot like Coraline?
Well, and then of course, when we get kind of the, the final boss fight, we get the Chauncey fight. Like there were so many people that in my theater, even that jumped at tons of jump scares in the movie that just laughed when Chauncey is in his full form as this, monstrous, bear
yeah.
with massive teeth and stuff, which
Yeah.
I kind of get that you're trying to do this like, it's like kind of, kiddish, but it's, scary. I thought this could have been like like he could have looked a little more menacing or scary. He just looked ridiculous.
Yeah.
And
so
everybody
goofy.
in my theater
and I
was
said
just
bear.
laughing at him.
Saying as a bear, it's probably charitable. I don't even know how to describe him. He looks very goofy and strange.
To me, he was far more menacing as just the little stuffed doll than he was.
And that's kind of what I was thinking with this movie. This also has a revelation, kind of like, I don't know, getting towards the third act where the bear never existed at all. He was always imaginary.
Yeah.
And I kind of go like, why was that necessary? Isn't having like an imaginary friend or an entity attached to this bear that you're the only one who could hear, like them talking to you and the voices in your head sort of thing, isn't that imaginary enough? Why does the bear also not have, like, why can't he exist? Why do we need like almost like this dumb Saw montage of where they show the scenes back through the movie and the bear is just missing in all these scenes? Like, why do we need that? Like, I don't understand. The movie is stronger if it's just an imaginary friend movie that like the imaginary friend is a malevolent spirit in the form of a teddy bear. Like, I don't understand why we needed him to also be imaginary and to also be like kind of ruler of this imaginary realm. It's just so strange, especially with kind of the little kernel that they get into, obviously, that it's Jessica Chauncey. She had this imaginary friend of Chauncey as well when she was a kid, and essentially Chauncey is almost like a stand-in for kind of her repressed like childhood trauma, which I was like, it's kind of interesting conceptually to see like basically you're a stepmother, you're trying to make inroads with these children, and there's this one entity, Chauncey, kind of poisoning the well, kind of letting the kid know all your dirty laundry and know like everything that went wrong in your past that you may not even remember to a certain regard. There's a more interesting story there than what we wind up doing. It's like, I think that's a more interesting movie if it's just literally this possessed doll. The possessed doll is, feeding the kid wrong information about the mother. She wants her biological mother back in her life. It's a smaller scale movie without a whole like fantastical world, but it's essentially like, yeah, this imaginary friend is not who they say they are. And of course, we've seen that in numerous other movies, but it's just, I still think it's a stronger movie. It's still going to feel tropish and trite. And, it's not going to be like anything that we haven't seen before. But I think it probably would have been a more competent movie if they kind of reined it in a little bit.
Like you said, I mean, just this falls apart in so many spots because, like I said, I just think I say, pay homage, but what it's really doing is just trying to mimic all these movies. And probably what it should have done is like maybe picked a movie to mimic and like, we're just going to rip this movie off or do a different telling of this instead of kind of just mishmashing all these genres, all these callbacks to other things. Like we didn't talk about, there's this reoccurring theme of this light up, this light that
yeah, spins around,
yeah, which is like a famous item from The Conjuring 2.
And also that scene with the therapist where basically they're sussing out if the girl is possessed, essentially, or if she has an imaginary friend. Does she have any underlying mental health issues? It's very much evocative of that scene once again from The Conjuring 2. But in The Conjuring 2, I think what they do is they make the girl have a mouthful of water and then see if the voice can still talk through her.
Yeah.
Essentially, because if it's a biological thing, if your mouth's full of water, you can't speak, right? So if you do, it's clearly otherworldly. It's like, once again, at least they put a spin on a scene we've seen dozens of times. This is very much just the scene over again, even if it is a scene that I would say is slightly more competent than a lot of the other scenes in the movie.
Well, and to me, like, I actually did like, the little song it played and stuff. I'm like, oh yeah,
it was a cute song,
creepy.
Yeah.
But yet again, like, what did we use that whole scene for? So it could set up a cheap scare with like, Alan. They use it again in the dream world for a jump scare that we think is going to be Chauncey, and then it's just, a vision of like zombie Alice as a jump scare, and it's just like, well, this is stupid. And then yet again, when they try to escape the world and this malevolent being then turns into like this spider monster that we're teased with in the cold open, which is obviously like the influence of her as a child, which of course I saw it. I'm like, well, I know what they're ripping off here this is it. He's got the deadlights that it has that, basically puts the person that sees it into, a trance coma for the rest of their life. A giant spider monster is what it turns into. Like, I was like, so, yeah, there's just, like, all these things going on. The spider monster looked terrible.
Yeah, it was really bad. It was okay in, like, the very first shot where I think you see the legs kind of, like, explode out of the back.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like a profile shot really quick as she's, like, turning a door to run away or something. But yeah, when you see it kind of crawling on the walls and ceiling stuff, it's awful. Yeah, and I didn't enjoy that either. I think it's, once again, like I think like conceptually, I like the ideas of Jessica like inadvertently taking aspects from her childhood trauma and putting it into, a children's book. Like obviously the spider is a prominent character in this children's book that Alice is scared of, but part of the narrative is kind of like making these monsters no longer scary and learning to embrace them, and then in the end ultimately like kind of understanding where they come from and almost like having a friendship with them or whatnot. It was like, okay, it's interesting that like her recurring nightmare is like this spider, and like also the villain or the malevolent force in her children's books is also a spider. But I don't know really where it all comes together or what the explanation for the spider is, or I don't know why Millie the millipede is like designed after herself. It's probably her childhood self. But it was just something where I was like, it feels like there was something missing here for a movie that kind of is too long. It's like an hour and 49 minutes. It's too long that we can't even effectively dredge up the childhood trauma to make this movie hit harder, when obviously that's so every single movie I feel like we talk about how it's all about trauma in the end, and it's funny for this one I'm like, I kind of wish it explored the trauma more. I wish we spent less time in this weird funhouse world where Alice is a princess and has a room full of all of her toys that she doesn't want to leave, and spent a little bit more understanding like, okay, where does this spider thing come from, like why was this so important, other than just being a scary horror creature if they could have done it well. Before we give our rating, the one last thing I kind of want to mention is I like the idea of Chauncey's list.
Yeah, I did really like that.
It's a very natural progression that basically it starts off as just like childish things. Like, oh, find something that makes you happy, find something that makes you sad, find something that you can be brave. But by the end, it's like find something that puts yourself in pain. And I kind of think they could have pushed that like slightly further. And I think in that version of the movie, you wouldn't have made it like completing this list, obviously, to open up an alternate world. It'd be like this force pushing this child to commit, like a heinous crime. Like, it's not like, what you do for pain. It winds up being like, oh, get your family back together. So inadvertently, like, oh, you should get rid of your stepmom or something. Or, you'd have something where it's like this child winds up being a little bit more malevolent by the end. Of course, then you get into like the possessed scary kid trope. But like, I wanted to see a little bit more. I wanted to ramp up a little bit more because I liked it as kind of like this plotting point where you can kind of see where the movie's going, and there's a natural progression here. It was just, I don't think it was really explored to the fullest, and I think that's the issue with a lot of parts of this movie, that it's not really explored to where it should be.
And I think obviously, they wanted to keep this at a rating, but I feel like there would have been almost, a little higher rating with some malevolent kid action and like, like you said, like getting the kid to, harm other people in the family, or even like harm themselves to the fact of like killing themselves or something. And then we have all these like dead children, and
well, it's a very natural progression where the father leaves the movie and basically he's never a presence in it, not even like with phone calls or anything really, if I remember correctly throughout the movie, where it's like, what if something really tragic did happen? What if, Alice had a really bad accident that caused, him basically to not believe that Jessica's a fit mother, but he also can't get back because he's in the middle of a tour and he's, stuck. He can't get back right away. And basically their relationship is falling apart, as also like the physical health of one of the kids is deteriorating. There's a lot of drama you could have mined here. And like, sure, like once again, we've seen aspects of that in other movies as well. But we've seen basically this whole movie either in all the movies you've mentioned throughout the review. So it's like, yeah, it's just, I don't know. The way they went was not the most interesting way to be. Maybe other people will enjoy it, but it wasn't, my cup of tea. So with that, is it time to get into reviewing it or giving it a rating?
Yeah, let's do it.
So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, what would you give Imaginary?
I really ruminated on this one because, like I said, I went into it and I was like, it's not Night Swim. But then, like you said, how much better than Night Swim is it? Which really is kind of the issue. So I'm going to come in on an A. But it's like, it could have almost been a low okay to me. Because like we both said, I think there is like some really cool and interesting ideas in this. There was so much of the runtime of me watching it and thinking, man, if only they had done this could have been like pretty good. Like I would have had a really good time. And, unfortunately, just every one of those moments, it seemed they took the opportunity to take the exact opposite of what I wished it had done, and they went like the other way with it. They're like, no, we want to make sure Rowan has a bad time at this theater. And then the only thing I do want to bring up that we didn't bring up was the fact that this might have the worst old people makeup of all time with the father.
I agree as well. Yeah, we probably should have touched on that, but just he looks exactly the same when he's in the hospital bed, other than they sprayed maybe like 1 or 2 streaks of gray in his hair. Same build, basically even the same clothing.
Gave him like a couple
30 years earlier.
Gave him a couple of head wrinkles. I felt like I was watching like The Nutty Professor or like a Medea movie or something. Like that's how ridiculous he looked in bed.
Well, we didn't explore it, but that whole plot line with the dad and the dad looking into a realm of pure imagination and becoming blind and losing his mind and all this stuff is like, that's the fall sucks. That was like just awful. There was no redeeming qualities there in my opinion. I almost forgot it was even in there.
But yeah, so I mean, just overall, I think this is messy enough. You got to give it an A, and you got to give it an A too for the fact that what's this movie telling our kids? I guess that imagination is a terrible thing, and don't be imaginative. So just an A all around. Sadly for this, the glimmer of hope is gone, people. I'm sorry. Colton, what would you give it?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Everything I like about this movie is more conceptual, or like where they could have went. Maybe saying everything's a little bit harsh. Like I said, I did think the kids gave pretty good performances. God, I'd have to go back and scroll up and see what else I like. It wasn't completely technically incompetent, right? Like it was still like, it's a lot better than some of these low budget horror movies that I've seen. It's just for me, like I wasn't scared. I found it very boring. I hated where the third act goes, the twists with the dad and the alternate realm and Gloria, I think that's her name, the neighbor.
Yeah.
All of that, essentially, once she kind of rears her head and we start exploring, kind of like explaining everything, the movie completely lost any allure to me. And basically, I think even like my mom, who, found a few of the scares in the first half to get her, there was nothing for like the last probably 35, 40 minutes of the movie that got her. It was very much like, this went off the rails. This is ridiculous. And yeah, I just think it was kind of not the most novel idea, but it could have been a lot better. And I think they kind of squandered it. So yeah, it's an A from me. It's not like the worst one we've seen, but I just can't give it an okay. Even if I was like mildly entertained the entire movie, I'd probably give it an okay. But I was very bored. I was very checked out, and anything, left for this movie, like what I was truly enjoying was like kind of imagining where it could have went, and we never got there. So it's an A from me as well. And if you made it this far in the show and you're not following us on our socials already, you can do so at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Slasher, Letterboxd, Threads, Blue Sky. If there's a social media, we're probably there at It Slays Podcast. And if you want to help support the show financially, like our horror hounds Holly, Nicholas, Patrick, Mark, Steven, Joy, Carvey, Dan, Brian, Trevor, and Genesis, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early. If Rowan could edit it in time, be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Rowan, you actually noticed the music in this movie. I noticed it as well, of course. It was like kind of rip off Spielberg.
It's not
is
going
anything
on.
making the
Yeah.
playlist?
No, it's not going on. I noticed it, but not
Yeah.
necessarily in a positive way. But if you do want to listen to some good music, go to Spotify to the It Slays Podcast Horrific playlist. If you have any problems finding it, you can go to any of the social media Colton just mentioned. Go to the bio. There's a Linktree link. Click it. It'll take you right there. We upload licensed music or scores from iconic horror movies we review, or just horror movies we love. So yeah, go follow the playlist and get your spooky music on, because why the hell not?
And next time on the show, we have a pretty big movie, I think, with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Yourself and I, we were going back and forth, wondering if this kind of fits the show. We were basically like, well, we did We Have a Ghost or whatever it was a year or two ago. Might as well review such a big movie with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. There's also the new religious horror movie, Immaculate, produced and starring Sydney Sweeney. That's coming out in theaters next weekend. And there's even a new kind of Australian horror movie that's hitting Shudder called You'll Never Find Me, which... who knows? Maybe we'll do a review of that if it kind of makes sense. But yeah, there's definitely a few things coming up. We'll be back in another week or so with another episode of Now Slaying. And with that, I think that's about wrap things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.